So without further ado, let me get into the introduction of our first speaker in this series on positively deviant organizations. And I'm very excited to introduce you to John Weiss. I got introduced to him a few months ago by way of Chris White, who had a chance to meet with him and get to know him a bit through one of their fundraisers for Neutral Zone. And as somebody with just a budding high schooler, I'm learning a lot about this organization as well, because they do some amazingly creative work with our youth here in Ann Arbor. He's really made a positive difference in his last 25 years working with the development of youth in a very diverse set of populations. You can see some of his formative experiences have really shaped his perspective and his sense of caring and compassion, and really challenging youth to their full potential. He worked with youth in the San Francisco Conservation Corps, and then joined the Peace Corps, where he was a teacher in Gambia for a couple of years in West Africa. He is married and has 3 children who are also, he's working hard to develop in innovative ways, and who he told me we're very glad to have this snow day as well. He tells me he's an avid cook, home brewer. He's a kettlebeller. I didn't know what a kettlebeller is, so you have to look it up too if you don't know. And he's also a community activist. He's right now putting a lot of effort into helping rebuild the Ypsilanti Community Pool, an important place for youth in the summertime. But today he's here to talk about his amazing work with the Neutral Zone. We had hoped to get a few students to join him, but the lunchtime time period isn't exactly the best, but who would have known it would have been a snow day? It could have worked. So without further ado, let's give John a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, I got to put yours.
Okay. Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right? Thank you for that warm introduction, and I'm excited to come here and tell you about the Neutral Zone. Those of you who know me, anytime I get a chance to talk about the Neutral Zone, I do so. I'm also going to share with you a little bit about our youth-driven space approach, which is our framework for working with young people. And then in the past couple of years, we've had an opportunity to disseminate this approach to other youth-serving programs and to some schools as well. And so I'll close my presentation by telling you a little bit about that work. But in order to get you into this and to get you to think a little bit about our framework, I'm going to ask you to participate in an activity. So think to yourself, consider a hobby you enjoy. What is it? How did you get into it? Why do you enjoy it? Maybe a little bit thinking about how is it different than work or school. Okay, now I'm going to make you talk to somebody near you. And so turn to the person next to you, or if you're at a table with 3, you can triple up. And I want you to share with your partner and tell them a little bit about your hobby, why you enjoy it, how you got into it, and how it's different than your work or your school. You're allowed to talk. Go ahead. Thanks. Clap once if you can hear my voice. Clap twice if you can hear my voice. Clap 3 times if you can hear my voice. It works on adults, too. It's amazing. Are there a couple of people who are willing to share with the larger group a little bit about your hobby? All right, go for it, Joseph.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joseph anyway. And my hobby, I didn't realize that it was an actual thing until now. But growing up, I used to love to flip. Whether that was twisty flips, I still don't know the names. I didn't take gymnastics or anything like that. But they included running up the wall, flipping off the monkey bars, what have you. I used to love to flip. I was scared of it. I was the only child, so I didn't have any friends, so I just flipped. And that kind of leads into how did I get into it. Me being the only child, I really looked up to my cousin. My mom's a twin, and so they're essentially, he was my brother. And me being the only child, anything he did, I wanted to do, if not do it better. And so he could flip. And I guess that's how I took after him. And then why do I enjoy it? At the beginning of my opening, I was saying I didn't realize that it was an actual thing until now. It's called parkour or free running. Anybody heard of it? Mm-hmm. Hey, so I figured, that's the actual community that likes to flip. That's wonderful. And so
Nice.
I met a few people here over by the Cube. That's kind of a Michigan symbol by the Union. They do it there, so occasionally I go there when it's nice outside and flip. The reason I enjoy it is the whole premise behind parkour or free running is finding the best way between A and B, like the most direct way, kind of incorporate as much creativity as you can on the way, and I guess that's acrobatic creativity, and getting it. And it's really fun. It has this adrenaline aspect, and I think that leads into the last question, in what ways is it different than work? I kind of get this adrenaline, and I'm scared, but after I do it, I'm like, oh my God, I feel awesome. I did something crazy.
Nice.
So I think that's my hobby in a nutshell.
Good. Thank you. Can I get one other person who'd be willing to share their hobby? Come on, don't be shy. Janet.
I love to sew. I've been sewing. Actually, my mom cannot sew at all when I was 7. For Christmas, she gave me a sewing box and said, "You're on your own." And my grandmother taught me how to sew. I've loved it ever since. I love to hand sew, and I've made quilts in the past. I love anything to do with color and shape. And also moved on to making mosaic out of Byzantine glass.
Oh, nice.
Very similar to quilting, but a lot easier.
Good. Great. Thank you. All right. Well, let me tell you about a hobby I have. I'm a home brewer. We got any home brewers in the crowd? All right. Rich. Should hang out sometime. So home brewing is where you make your own beer. I've been doing it for about 17 years. I love to cook, as was shown on the first slide introducing me, so it gives me an opportunity to hang out in the kitchen. I'm also, a lot of people don't know this, but I have an undergraduate degree in cellular and molecular biology. So I took a lot of chemistry classes. So home brewing gives me an opportunity to reconnect with my chemistry. I get to be creative. I get to throw things in. I'll sometimes go to the garden. I'll grab some jalapeno peppers and I'll chop them up and I'll throw them in the beer. And it's just a nice, relaxing time. You were talking about your hobby, how relaxing it is. It's just fun to kind of hang out and be in the kitchen and have some time to homebrew. So by show of hands, how many of you would be interested in homebrewing with me sometime if you had a chance? Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. I got to see who I'm going to invite over. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about home. Keep your hands up. It won't be long. So I have a family, and I'm pretty busy, and so I usually homebrew on the weekends, and I usually try to homebrew early in the weekends, like on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock or maybe even 7 o'clock before the family gets up. So how many of you would still be interested in joining me? Okay, we still got a few people hanging on. The other thing is, and Rich knows this, you have to be very sterile. It's a sterile process, and it's easy to contaminate the wort. And if you do that, you'll spoil 5 gallons of beer. So if you were to join me, I probably couldn't let you do much more than open up the ingredients, or maybe just watch me. So how many of you would still be interested in joining me? Oh, we still have a few people lingering on. Okay, thank you. So the reason I did this exercise about hobbies and told you about my hobby is this concept that I'm sure many of you are familiar with about intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation is one of the key pillars to our work at the Neutral Zone. And intrinsic motivation is the motivation that comes from within. It's not guided by external rewards like a paycheck or a grade, but you do it just because of the love of what you do. And research shows that there's a lot of factors of intrinsic motivation, but these are the top 4: enjoyment, control, curiosity, and challenge. So when Joseph was telling us about parkour, I heard a lot of challenge in there. When I was eavesdropping with Betsy here, she was talking about the enjoyment and kind of the challenge of trying new things. When I homebrew, I have control over the process. I get to make the beer. So it really taps my intrinsic motivation. And this is a concept that's really important to our work at the Neutral Zone. I think of it as one of our 3 pillars. So intrinsic motivation helps to drive what we do at the Neutral Zone. So let me tell you what the Neutral Zone is and what the youth-driven space approach is, and then I'll come back to this concept of intrinsic motivation. The Neutral Zone is a teen center here in Ann Arbor. We're on Washington Street, 2 blocks east of Main. And our mission is, wait, let me test one of our board members. I have a board member here, and I make them memorize the mission. Debbie, what's our mission?
It is a place that is devoted to...
Don't look at the screen.
Oh, to promoting personal growth through leadership, the arts, and exchange of ideas.
Okay. B+. The other 2 parts to our mission is that we're diverse and that we're youth-driven. And we're diverse in a lot of different ways. I had a chance to talk with Paul and Diane. We're diverse in terms of the young people we serve. We're diverse in terms of the programs we offer. And you'll hear a lot about our programs this afternoon. It's for high school-age teens. Most of our teens come from Ann Arbor, about 80%. Most of the rest come from the Ypsilanti area. But we're open to any high school-age teen anywhere. So I used to have a teenager who would drive in from Walled Lake, which is about an hour from here, on a weekly basis to participate at the Neutral Zone. So you only have to be high school age to participate at the Neutral Zone. So any of you want to come over, you better get a fake ID and prove you're under 18, and I'll let you in. Our approach to working with young people is what we call the youth-driven space approach. And what this means is we drive our programs and what we do around teen interests and teen ideas. And we give lots of opportunities for teenagers or for young people to help really drive what we do. They serve in advisory capacities. They help to make decisions about the organization. They're involved in the staff hiring. They plan their own projects and initiatives. They decide how money is spent. And they help to create our organizational policy. So again, back to intrinsic motivation is one of the 3 pillars of the Neutral Zone. So by way of example, let me tell you about a couple programs that happen at the Neutral Zone, and I think they're good examples of how we tap teens' intrinsic motivation. One of the fabulous spaces at the Neutral Zone is a real live recording studio called the Orpheum. And I was telling Paul and Diane, when teens walk in, their eyes nearly fall out of their sockets because it's this incredible space, hardwood floors, track lighting, really cool design all around, huge soundboard, lots of equipment, and they get to come in, they actually get to learn how to do audio recording. Or they might be a band that's coming in to get recorded to be put on our record label. We also have beat-making stations there. We have turntables. And so teens get all this amazing technology that they get to come in, they get to try, they get challenged by our staff. It's enjoyable to them, and they're able to really tap their curiosity. So again, I think it's a great example of intrinsic motivation. Another program that I think is a wonderful example of how we tap teens' intrinsic motivation is a program that we had done over the past 9 years with the University Musical Society. And it's a project called Breaking Curfew. We select about 20 teen curators who work in partnership with our University Musical Society to put on this huge production at the Power Center. The teens decide what talent to book. They decide how to stage it, how to market it, how to do the lighting. They're in control of the whole process, and it culminates in this incredible teen performance that's sold out for the last 9 years in front of 1,300 people. It's thrilling to them to be involved in planning and executing this project. And let me show you a little clip from last year's Breaking Curfew. Oops.
I'm here. I think we just need to click with the mouse.
Okay, that's a little taste of Breaking Curfew. As you can see, there's just this amazing range of, these are all teen performers, again, that perform in front of a sold-out audience at the Power Center. So before I introduce the second pillar of our approach to working with young people, I'm going to give you a little quiz. Everybody ready for a quiz? Come on. Okay, I want you to look at this list. And there are 13 different items up here. And I want you to think to yourself, or if you want to write something down, that's fine. I want you to look at this list and think about what are the 7 most important needs up there for healthy adolescent development. Which of these 7 are the most important needs for healthy psychological, emotional, cognitive, physical, and social development? Which of these 7 are most important? Okay, pencils down. It's just the teacher and me, sorry. Okay, and the answers are, according to research, the 7 most important developmental needs for adolescents are physical activity, structure and clear limits, need for creative expression, need for self-definition, competence and achievement, meaningful participation, positive social interactions, and that's 7. How many got all 7 right? How many got 1 or 2 wrong? Okay. We have some budding youth development people in the crowd. So let me tell you a little bit more about some of our programs through the lens of these 7 developmental needs. The first is physical activity. In our programs, teens get to exercise their bodies. The neutral zone's not school. We don't make teens sit in their chairs. They're able to get up, to move their bodies, to manipulate lots of equipment, lots of technology, to work collaboratively in groups. We are always doing cheesy icebreakers, getting teens up out of their seats and moving around. And this helps to support their need for physical activity, because adolescents are at a time in their growth, of their most rapid growth in their humanhood besides infancy. So that first year, 0 to 1, is when humans have their most rapid physical growth, and then the second most rapid is during adolescence. So you need to get them up and moving around. The second developmental need that adolescents have is for structure and clear limits. So even as teens increase their need for independence and freedom, they still need structure and clear limits, as much as they might fight it. But structure and clear limits are important for their healthy development. Now, within that, they also need to have authentic choices and meaningful participation. But they need to be bound by structure and clear limits. So one of our initiatives is something we call weekend concerts. So nearly every Saturday night at the Neutral Zone, we have a live weekend concert put on by teens. We have this wonderful 400-person capacity venue space where teen bands perform on a Saturday night. Of course, one of our structure and clear limits is that it's an alcohol and drug-free space. That's mandatory. But within that, we don't censor the bands that perform. And then if something occurs in the space and we need to put some more structure and clear limits in, we negotiate that with the teens. So let me tell you a little bit about what happened this past fall. There was a metal band that was playing, and there were about 250 people there. In the middle of the concert, the band invited a bunch of people on stage, and before we knew it, somebody jumped off the stage and landed on one of the concert goers. So on Monday, we pulled our teens together that run the venue, and we said, what are we going to do about this? And so they decided to put up big no stage diving signs around the Neutral Zone venue. And they also inserted in the agreement that they put with bands a clause that says, if you invite people onto the stage that are not part of your band, we're going to turn off the power and stop the music until they come off. So that was something they came up with their own. They helped create the structure and clear limits. They took a lot of ownership over that particular event. Creative expression. Teens need to explore. They need to express their thoughts, their feelings, their interests, their ideas. And we have a lot of creative programs at the Neutral Zone in literary arts, spoken word poetry, in visual arts, and then we also have one of our core sets of programs is around music. We have an independent record label called Youth Own Records, and a group of teens actually produces 3 or 4 CDs every year and puts it out into the community, putting teen music out on a CD and releasing it out into the community. And they're incredibly talented teens doing a diverse genre of music. And I want to play you one of my favorite bands that came out last year, Soul Transit. And they were played a lot on WEMU this past year. And if you want to buy the CD, I can sell it to you for $10. Soul Transit. Oops, I went the wrong way. The next developmental need that teens have is the need for self-definition. They need lots of opportunities to explore who they are and what they're becoming in the world. And I think one of my best examples of self-definition at the Neutral Zone is our volume poetry program. Our volume poetry program meets on Thursday evenings. There's about 20 teens that come together in our leadership lounge. They read, they write, and they critique each other's spoken word poetry. And then we have 3 or 4 large-scale events during the year where young people can go out and perform their poetry in the community, including an event that we hold in November at Rackham called Poetry Night in Ann Arbor. And there's usually 600 people that come and attend Poetry Night in Ann Arbor. So let me play you a poem of one of our recent young people.
A man approaches 2 others and me like Morgan Freeman's version of God, dark and old in a Kroger parking lot. He says, they're stuck. My 7 grandchildren, a van with their mother, out of gas, they're cold. They're cold. Do you know the bus schedule? Can you tell me how we get to St. Francis? I've heard God's there. In the windows, bread only costs $1, man. If I could just bring something back to them, they're stuck. Says this man who approaches like winter, 2 others and me in a Kroger parking lot. We are 3 girls taught not to talk to strangers. We are 3 daughters raised to look away when asked for random help. This is different, though. Not man on crutches who mumbles for money next to liquor store. No mother to hold my hand tighter to whisper nothing's ever easy. You gotta remember that sometimes fingers take money for drugs. Even if they look hungrier than you've ever grumbled, my neighbor carries cans of food in her car. Passes them out at corners of highway exits to cardboard signs. This way, she knows she's healthy. Feeding stomach and not veins. On Monday, I followed my parents as they walked by and ignored a man crumbled like concrete, stuck out a cup and asked for help. Kroger parking lot man does not stutter the word help. Says stuff. Says kids. And we 3 are kids still in a car made of parents' money, and parking lot man demands eye contact. We don't know what to do but sputter. I wonder if it's wrong that I cannot hear 7 grandchildren fastened and crying, cannot imagine the hair of their mother. I wonder if it's wrong that none of me believes these kids are buckled or breathing, how 7 is actually the number of years this man's fallen from sober. Or maybe he has 7 grandchildren that he's never met, but they're always around that corner in that van. We spit directions to St. Francis. It's all we know to give. Yesterday, my teacher asked another student, where is God? And my classmate answered, everywhere. And suddenly, I'm questioning if God is Kroger parking lot, if God is the 3rd beggar on Main Street when you're out of change, but this one's got another look in his eyes. If my Christian parents would acknowledge God's face, even if he was pushing a cup, if this is a test you can never pass, because you can't ever have faith in anything besides wrinkles from drugs and fingernails from scraping. I cross the street to avoid questions, so I can look at the ground without feeling I should look up at another heart. I can't handle choosing to focus eyes almost as much as I can't handle give without return. But nothing's ever easy. God's gotta need help sometimes. He's gotta be in parking lots across the world or the sidewalks of New York City, but I can never muster up enough anything to look him in the eye, to give him my pocket, to acknowledge him as human, or fail him. I guess I'm wondering the point where people fade to brick, then God. My mother said she saw this same man 3 months later in the Kroger parking lot, carrying a bag of food, telling the same story. My father ran into him at the gas station, twice. On Tuesday, I left 7 children to die, stuck on the other side of the road.
I think it's just such a wonderful way for young people to express themselves. And when I came to the Neutral Zone, I didn't realize that performance poetry was such a big part of a lot of teenagers' lives. But they're incredible. The next developmental need that teenagers have is for meaningful participation. We have a number of programs at the Neutral Zone where young people do what I call real work. I mean, most of what they do is real work. But we have a group of teens that run an independent press called Redbeard Press. They publish 4 or 5 books every year. They do all the marketing, the design, the layout. They decide what authors to publish. As I mentioned, we have a record label, and then we also have our concert venue run by teens. I think two of the examples of meaningful participation that resonate most with me is a group that meets on a weekly basis called our Teen Advisory Council. Our Teen Advisory Council is a group of 15 young people that serve as a board committee. And their charge is to approve, fund, and evaluate programs. We don't start any new program initiatives at the Neutral Zone unless it's approved by the Teen Advisory Council. So by virtue of their power, they get to decide what happens within our 4 walls. They also raise about $2,000 or $3,000 every year, and they make mini grants back out to the other 19 programs. So if the Young Women's program wants to take a camping trip, or the Volume Poets want to bring in a guest artist, they'll make a grant proposal to our Teen Advisory Council. And then that group also does our annual program evaluation. So at the end of the year, they'll run surveys, focus groups, write a report, and come to our Board of Directors meeting in May and present their evaluation findings. The highest levels of participation at the Neutral Zone is on our Board of Directors. We currently have a board of 28 members, and 12 of them are teenagers. And those teenagers have all rights and responsibilities alongside the adult community leaders, making policy, approving our budget, reading our monthly financials, hiring and firing me. They have all board privileges that the adults do. The 6th developmental need that teens have is for competence and achievement. And I want to tell you a little bit about one of our largest programs that I think is a terrific example of competence and achievement. We have a group of teens that meet on Fridays called Riot Youth. And it's a group that serves gay, lesbian, transgender, queer, questioning, and allied teens. And their primary charge is to create a safe space for teens from those identities. But in addition to that work, they have also been doing a bunch of social justice and advocacy work. 5 years ago, one of those teens, Yoni Seiden, who was a senior at Pioneer High School, was driving away from school and was run off the road by a group of hockey players. And when he was run off the road, they started yelling negative epithets at him for being gay. He took that back to Riot Youth, and Riot Youth took his anger and his frustration and created a climate survey. And they worked with a doctoral student at U of M, and they administered this climate survey to 1,200 students across the Ann Arbor schools. And they wanted to find out what the climate was like for teens from different identities, with a focus on gay, lesbian, transgender, queer, and questioning. Then what they did, which was so incredible, is they took those evaluation findings and they wrote a thick report, which some academics like to read. But they took the stories from those surveys and they turned it into this incredible performance narrative that they called guerrilla theater. And they performed guerrilla theater for students, for administrators, for counselors. They performed for state conferences. There is so much demand for guerrilla theater where they come and tell the stories of these young people through their performances. And then they follow the performances with a dialogue. So they engage the audience, if it's a school audience, in terms of reflecting on how their school climate could be improved for teens from different identities. In fact, as I said, they've received so much interest in their project, we were funded this past year to create a toolkit. And so they actually took their performance narrative and they put it on a DVD. They created a how-to manual. And then they also created a handbook with their survey in it, which they're distributing to other teens from around the state that are interested in replicating their work. And again, I think it's a terrific example of the kinds of achievement young people can have when they have the right kinds of supports and opportunities. And then our final developmental need is around supportive relationships. The nature and quality of relationships are often cited as one of the most important factors for healthy adolescent development. And we have incredible staff at the Neutral Zone and volunteers who help to support our teens. I had a friend who finished his doctoral work in education and psychology here at U of M last year, and he did a short study on the Neutral Zone. And what he found is that teens come to the Neutral Zone for the content. So they want to try digital photography, or they hear we have a recording studio, or they want to get involved in a leadership program. But what keeps them staying and coming back is the relationships that they have with our staff and with their peers. Here are two important people at the Neutral Zone, and what I love about both of them is they're very different, but the teens love both of them equally. On the left there is Jim. Jim is currently a teacher in Detroit. For 2 years, Jim would come to our space as a volunteer tutor 4 days a week. He was there consistently. He was there regularly. Jim is a self-proclaimed nerd. He loves to read history, is what he does in his free time. And he's also very quiet and very understated. But when I would come down to the cafe in the afternoons, I would see 3 or 4 teens huddle around Jim getting homework help, or I'd see him in a big game of Monopoly with 6 teens, and they just loved him. And I think a big part of that was he demonstrated his caring and his support by showing up all the time. On the right is one of our current staff members, Jamal. Jamal is a local hip-hop artist known as Buff One in the community. He's known very well throughout the area, and he's also done a lot of national touring. And he provides a different kind of mentorship for teens. He's very into the hip-hop scene. He knows a lot about music. And again, teens just congregate and want to hang out with him. And so I love the diversity of staff and volunteers we have, and that we're able to support teens through people like Jim and Jamal. So intrinsic motivation, the first pillar, supporting teens' developmental needs, the second pillar, and then the third pillar, which is connected to this concept of supportive relationships, is a concept of adult-youth partnerships. The staff at the Neutral Zone don't work in a laissez-faire way. They don't just let the teens run wild. And we also don't direct what they do. But we work in a very supportive, what we call adult-youth partnership. And there's current research on adult-youth partnerships that I think is very fascinating. And Shep Zeldin, who's one of the premier researchers in the youth development field, recently did a study, and he defined adult-youth partnerships as multiple youth and adults acting together in collective fashion over a sustained period of time through shared work intended to promote social justice or strengthen an organization or address a community issue. He also further delineates adult-youth partnerships by saying that they have these 4 elements. And this third one here, reciprocity, I think is a really fascinating one. It's a sharing of control between adults and youth. So it's a space that's driven by youth interests and ideas and supported by the adults. There's also another piece of research which is in press. It hasn't been published yet, which is very connected to adult-youth partnerships. That's called developmental relationships. And the researcher who did this work characterizes developmental relationships as reciprocal human interactions, embodying an enduring emotional attachment, progressively more complex patterns of joint activity. And then this fourth one I think is really important, a balance of power that gradually shifts from the developed person in favor of the developing person. And I think that describes what happens at the Neutral Zone so well because we have multiple points of access for young people. They can come to our drop-in space. They can hang out. They don't have to commit to anything. But we're always trying to push them to get involved in projects and help lead initiatives. And then they may step into one of our weekly programs where they help to plan a project. And if they stick around long enough, we may ask them to serve as a facilitator and to lead the weekly meetings in our programs. And then if they stick around long enough, we may ask them to join the board of directors. So we're always trying to push power and giving teens more opportunities for leadership as they continue to hang around. So when I think about youth-driven space, I think about this intersection of intrinsic motivation, adult-youth partnerships, and positive youth development. And as Gretchen was saying, and as I've learned a little bit about positive organizational structure and their concept of positive deviance may be the intersection of those three concepts. So I'm just going to close and tell you a little bit about some of the work that we're doing to disseminate our youth-driven spaces. In 2010, we received a 2-year grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and we worked with 3 partners to help create some training and coaching that would help other youth-serving programs become more youth-driven in the way that the Neutral Zone is youth-driven. We selected 8 partner agencies. These agencies were diverse across mission, geography, young people served, and we wanted to see how the youth-driven space concept could apply in different kinds of settings. Oops. And basically what we did is we started with a 3-day residential training, and we asked each of those organizations to bring a team of adults and youth, and we told them that the youth have to outnumber the adults so that youth voice is strong from the beginning. And we provided them 3 days of training in youth-driven practices and approaches. And then we sent the organizations back to their communities, and we provided monthly coaching. And we would go on a monthly visit and visit with them and support them and do additional training and help them move along this continuum to build youth voice into what they do. And what we found is that youth interest and engagement increased as a result of their work. And then the ultimate outcome we were pushing to reach was to help these organizations help young people develop what are known as 21st century skills. Collaboration, communication, critical thinking, problem solving, all those things that business says are important to be successful. And the team from Michigan State who did the research found incredibly powerful and statistically significant results in nearly all the categories that they surveyed the adults and youth in. And here are some of the ones that had the most strong statistical gains. And one of the examples that was one of my favorite examples is a group called Advocacy Services for Kids. Their mission is that they're dedicated to supporting families and improving the system of care for children's mental health. They work with young people and their families who have emotional and mood disorders. Nothing like the Neutral Zone. They had a body of teens that met every other week, and what they did is they took that group and they turned them into an advisory group, and they engaged them in the real work of advocacy services for kids. So they went out and they did outreach. They went out and they did presentations. They attended forums and conferences alongside the adults, and then took 2 of the young people and put them on their board of directors. And through that process, ASK, which again has a very different mission than the Neutral Zone, was able to become a lot more youth-driven. And then finally, I just want to mention briefly some work that we're currently doing with the state of Michigan. They received a federal grant called a Safe and Supportive Schools Grant. And they're working with the 24 most low-performing high schools around the state to improve academic achievement. And somebody somewhere in the Safe and Supportive Schools Grant said, we're going to have student voice and engagement drive the school reform process. And when they got to the implementation phase, the Department of Education said, we don't know how to do student voice and engagement, help. And we connected with them and started a project last August selecting 6 pilot high schools from their cohort, providing them training this summer for 2 days, followed up by coaching visits on a monthly basis. And the goal is to have each student team research an issue, plan and implement a project related to their school reform issue, and then to work further to implement sustainable structures and processes to help them have a consistent student voice and advisory in their schools. Whew, I made it. So I will take a big pause now and let you react, provide any feedback, or ask any questions.
I'm really intrigued as to how you got to where you are. Obviously, you're now disseminating a model. Some of it's based on research, and some of it's based on probably good instincts. I don't know, but I'm just wondering, how did you work out such a great formula for engaging the youth and running all these programs and operating the way you do?
You know, we're huge proponents of what's known as positive youth development, and when you go back to that developmental needs research, that's what we really focus our programming on. One of our partners on the Youth Driven Space Project is the Weiss Center for Program Quality. It's a spin-off from the High Scope Educational Research Foundation, which is in Ypsilanti. Some of you may have heard it. And they train youth workers. That's where I worked for 7 years, and currently 5 out of our 7 full-time program staff have been involved in a trainer-of-trainer program. So they've received ongoing professional development and then lots of mentorship from me and my colleague Lori, who's our Associate Executive Director. So we work at it constantly. Lots of professional development and lots of reflection. I mean, we have weekly meetings as directors, weekly meetings as program staff meetings every month where we do some kind of professional development. So we're a very reflective organization, and I think that helps us do what we do. Yes? Yeah, you know, some of the most underserved, marginalized kids are the hardest to engage. And what we find is that the kids who come from more marginalized or underserved backgrounds tend to hang out and drop in. And then kids from more privileged backgrounds tend to participate in the weekly programs. And it's kind of an interesting divide because a lot of our programs take place in our second story of our building, and drop-in mostly happens in the first floor. So people have noticed as you walk from the first floor to the second floor, there are lots of young people of color on the first floor, and then more privileged kids on the second floor. Now, again, we're always trying to push young people to get involved in our programs or to take on initiatives that are of interest to them. So our staff work really hard to push the drop-in teens to get involved in something more structured. But what makes the neutral zone work is we're a place of choice. So we would never require a teen to participate in a program or do something that he or she didn't want to do. So it's something we definitely struggle with, but I think what's wonderful about the space is there's a wonderful mutual respect for all young people that come there. And so what's different than school is when you walk into a high school cafeteria, you'll see different identities of young people sitting around the cafeteria. When you come into the neutral zone, you see young people really mixing and getting along. And I think music is probably the place where we have the most integration of, you know, all kinds of identities. But, you know, some of the programs are based on identity. So Riot Youth, even though they do invite allies to their program, it's mostly teens who identify as gay, lesbian, or transgender. Yes, food. Food always works. It worked for you guys. I think we got 50 of you in here when there was free pizza. So we put out snacks every day for drop-in, and then once a week on Thursdays typically we have a community group that comes in and cooks a full dinner. So if you're interested in learning about the neutral zone, come bring your friends in and cook for us. Yes?
You do a tremendous amount for arts-based needs, and as an outgrowth, you have tremendous leadership. How do you pull in those kids that would be like my 2 sons who are big galoos, who like to move but don't necessarily want to be involved in something like that? There's limited that they can do with the sound or lighting. What do you have for those big kids who say, hey, I want to move, but don't put me in sports?
Well, I think your question is how do we move young, or tell me your question again.
How do you bring them in? How do they become part of this community?
Well, we do a lot of outreach through the schools, and a lot of young people wind up at the neutral zone for the first time for a weekend concert. So they'll come on a Saturday night and because their friend is in a band or they heard of the band, and they'll look around and there's flyers everywhere and there's things on the wall, and it's an exciting, vibrant place. And so you may see something up and you may kind of take a chance and come back on Monday and get involved. We are a very welcoming environment. I heard a teen once say it takes all of 2 minutes to get comfortable at the neutral zone. So if we see a new face, we immediately connect, staff introduce themselves, try to connect you with a teenager who's a more veteran teen, get them to show you around, put the program brochure in their hand, and really try to get them involved in something. But, then we'll also step back because we want them to do what they want to do. But I think there's just so many multiple points of access that wherever a young person's interests are, I think they have ways to enter into the neutral zone easily. And then I think it's also the staff. So as I said, you walk into the studio and you see this equipment and you are overwhelmed, but it's exciting. And when Jonah, our studio manager, is sitting there, he'll invite you in and he'll say, "What's your name? Check out, I'm mixing our latest record here for Youth Own Records." And so there's always that invitation to participate. Chris.
I'll have to project as you're here and most people are
Yeah.
here. I had a question that most of us are involved in organizations, either businesses or non-profits, but not necessarily youth-focused organizations. What parts of your processes and structures and practices and so on do you think would apply generally to creating an engaged workplace as opposed to engaged youth?
I think it goes back to that intersection. So tapping people's intrinsic motivation. I think focusing on human development. And I think that that sharing of power. So I think, the most thriving organizations are those where everybody feels ownership. And I think the ones that people dislike the most are those where the boss is telling the workers what to do. So I think those same three principles apply: intrinsic motivation, human development, and kind of that sharing control and that moving the balance of power from those at the top to those who are, just entering in.
Yeah. How many hours a week typically do the kids spend or the students spend at the neutral zone?
There are some kids who are literally there every day at 2:30 when we open the door, and we have to kick them out at 8 o'clock. And then there are some kids who, will come on a weekly or 2 times a week. So the last year we served about 600 teens, and those were teens who came typically 1 or 2 times a week. And some of them would maybe come once every other week, and some of them were there every day, hands down.
That's on top of their school.
It's on top of their school. Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about what happens when a student lets you down by crossing the limit that you've set? How you handle that? And that maybe people couldn't handle.
Yeah. How do we, when a student lets us down or crosses a boundary, what do we do? It's a very adult. We try to do it in a very adult way. We obviously, because we have weekend concerts, and I said it's a alcohol-free and drug-free space, definitely had teens who have shown up under the influence. And if there's a teen who shows up and it's one of our teens, we pull them into the office and we talk to them about what they've done. And we also let them know that they're not only jeopardizing maybe their own safety, but they may be jeopardizing the neutral zone as a whole. Because if our donors came in and saw that we allowed, teens under the influence to come to our concerts, it would be a huge problem. And then we say to the young person, would you like me to call your parents, or would you like to call your parents and tell them what happened? And we set very strict boundaries. And they'll oftentimes call their parents and say, I made a mistake, and I'm here. And, so we work it out. But I'll tell you, the teens set stricter rules for themselves and check the space, I think oftentimes stricter than the adults do. And especially the teens that come on a regular basis, they have a lot of ownership there, and they take a lot of pride in what we do, and they don't want to jeopardize it. So if they see other teens who are not acting appropriately, it's usually the teens that will check the other teens before the adults do. Well, I welcome you all to come visit the Neutral Zone. If you want to come, shoot me an email. We love giving mission tours. Our Vice President, Debbie Herbert, is here joining us. Debbie, is there anything I failed to say that I should have said?
Here and kids who might be difficult to get involved. The whole leadership and social justice kinds of projects that developed. There was a team there about 3 years ago who, on her own, put together a Darfur action committee. I think of this teams were involved with SEED, which is student education, educating each other about diversity, which used to be a public school project, but they didn't know how to fund and handle. So I got turned over to Nutrizone. So specifically, community leadership or social justice project leadership pieces, in addition to these fantastic artistic expressions, whether they're visual, musical, or literary.
Yeah, thank you. I forgot to mention SEED.
So as we're wrapping up, I'd just like to challenge you for just a moment and think back to Chris's question. What, if you, in the organizations that you're part of, that you're trying to create more positive dynamics, what is the biggest insight that you can take away from John's talk? Which piece of those 7 elements, or maybe something else that you would say, here's the key insight for me about how to bring this to the organization that I'm part of. So take a minute and think about that question, and then I want to get a sense. Maybe we can put the 7 back up there and kind of see what piece moment.
Oh, yeah, I lost my clicker. Oh, there it is.
Let me just get a sense of the room. How many people that physical activity need more? Okay, good. That's a big one. Me about energy, how we manage our energy better. I think that's a big one. How about structure and women? Okay, a few hands there. Need for creative expression. Need for self-definition. Some of the same hands going up more than once, I see. Confidence and achievement. That's a big one in an academic environment, helping our students. Meaningful participation. That one's big for me as an empowerment person. And positive social interaction. Was there something that wasn't one of these 7 things that you said, aha, that's a real insight for me to take back to my organization? Is there something else that struck you? Yeah.
So creating a sense of ownership.
Yeah, creating that sense of ownership where people really feel like this is my organization. You know, I agree. Something else?
Kind of bring out that inner child, because I think they have less limits on how they think. To take on these huge projects, if you can kind of encourage less as adults. I'm just merging into adulthood, I guess, but to bring out and maintain that childlike dream or aspirational attitude, I think we should need.
Yeah. Not to lose that inner child that we all have buried someplace deep in there. Maybe that's what those hobbies do.
Yeah.
To get back to.
Definitely.
And also, have you ever had studies with adults would kind of teach what they learn from the process, as opposed to just benefits on the youth as well as the adults?
Yeah, the Youth-Driven Space Project we did, we also surveyed the adults to find out what impact becoming more youth-driven had on them, and their enjoyment of their work increased. They felt better about what they did, and there were significant gains for the adults as well. So I think it's good for the adults. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I think we do a good job of that. And that's not only me, but it's everybody at the neutral zone.
Yeah, the other piece I would add to that too is creating stepping stones. Maybe some people don't have the confidence right when they first come in that I can adequately evaluate, I need more direction. You guys seem to do a good job of thinking about how to develop people so they feel that sense of confidence that you're
Scaffolding.
at the same time.
Always scaffolding.
Yeah, scaffolding. I like that term. Other takeaways? Yeah.
Well, further to come to that ownership, I think that what comes from all of these different needs, the way it manifests in an organization is the grassroots level of where ideas come from. So it's some of these ideas here, but just the fact that ideas aren't necessarily coming from a top spot, and that people feel that ownership and feel their voices are heard because it's structured that way.
So often we feel like the leaders are the ones that have to come up with the good ideas. And you guys tried to do that, create a whole set of things.
We drive the teens away. I don't know what they want.
I think for me, one of the things I'm left thinking about is the idea of work as play. There was a great slide you had up there which had photos of the teens just beaming from ear to ear, arms around each other. And I love my team, some of whom are here. But, I can't remember the last time we looked like that in the workplace. And,
Chris needs a hug.
and it makes you think, why can't we push the boundaries of what is an organization? Gretchen does work beyond engagement to what is thriving at work. What does that look like? And I think many of the things that you guys have developed over many years at the Neutral Zone hold some of the answers to that.
Thanks.
Well, I have to say I'm really proud to have an organization like yours.
Thank you.
As part of our community, and as a parent of a high school student, to know that there's this kind of resource that's available. And so it's wonderful to see it. And I do think there's so many lessons for us about how we can take the ideas that you're using here and bring them to
Thank you.